Hello and welcome to the Nita Black Show. You would be surprised at how much goes wrong when you're trying to put up these series. But by the ancestors and the creators, we are able to get them up in time and come on to you. So we got this one up with 17 seconds to go. So everybody does their own thing. You got those that try to stop it, and of course, as fighters, it is our job to make it happen. All righty. We're doing a series. His name's my name too, and we are dealing with black businesses today. And there has been a lot of buzz, as I told you, about the series. So I knew it would be getting a lot of attention, good and bad. So that's okay. It's got black folks talking, and it's got black folks moving. So we're okay with that. We're going to try and get through the show today with my having a bit of pain, as usual, but it goes with the territory. We're going to hit you with a poem that we gave you last week, and this is, how do you know if you're part of the problem? This is a Black Clarity poem. How do you know if you're part of the problem? Your enemies eat the same food you eat and worse, yet they are winning. Obviously, what you eat is not the problem. Your enemy votes to keep you oppressed, yet you do not vote against them. Obviously, you're not voting is a problem. Your enemies make their own money for your people to spend, yet you cannot make your own money for your people to spend. Obviously, your inability to make your own money is a problem. Your enemies create businesses for their children to inherit, yet you do not create businesses for yours to inherit. Obviously, your inability to create your own businesses for your children to inherit is a problem. Your enemies think that you are inferior, yet you constantly state what you cannot do. Obviously, your belief in your own inferiority is a problem. Your enemies fight to enslave you 24 hours a day, yet you do not fight to free yourself 24 hours a day. Obviously, your fighting ability is a problem. Your enemies took over your world, yet you cannot take your world back. Obviously, your inability to defeat your enemies is a problem. Your enemies are winning the war against you, yet you do nothing to win this war. Obviously, your inability to win this war is a problem. Your enemies fought to keep you out of their businesses, yet you continue to invite your enemies into your businesses. Obviously, your inability to keep your enemies out of your businesses is a problem. Your enemies create jobs for their people, yet you do not create jobs for yours. Obviously, your inability to create jobs for your people is a problem. Your enemies are constantly fighting to destroy your nation, yet you are not fighting to protect your nations. Obviously, your inability to protect your nations is a problem. Your enemies are constantly working to program you to accept defeat, yet you willingly accept their programming. Obviously, your inability to deprogram yourself is a problem. Your enemies take every opportunity to put your people down, yet you too take every opportunity to put your people down. Obviously, your inability to lift your people up is a problem. Your enemies took away your ancient spirituality, yet you cannot give them back their religion and regain your ancient spirituality. obviously you're working for your enemies. That makes you part of the problem. That's a Black Panther poem by Nita Black, and we are going to, in extreme pain, go ahead and get started. The issues that we're going to deal with today, you'll see why the show is constantly being messed with. The information that we give to Black folks is information that many organizations are avoiding. Many organizations kind of stay away from. And sometimes these organizations just, don't want to mess up their funding by white agencies and whatnot. So they just avoid these kind of things, but that's okay. We're going to talk about what happened to Black businesses. You had a lot of family businesses back in the day, and you would have the Jones Family Farm or, the Atkins Family Grocery Store, and you would have the whole Black family, as we said before, working there in the store. But there's a couple of things that occurred over, especially the 1900s. From the turn of the century, 1900 to 1920, Black folks started building for Black folks. At the turn of the century, they realized that white folks were basically not good for Black folks, that Black folks were going to have to, since the so-called Emancipation Proclamation had taken 40 years of whites killing Blacks after it was ratified in 1865. You have 5 years before the turn of the century, the 1900s, Blacks started working on building for Black folks for the 1900s, for the new century. And so many of the freed slaves got together and decided to create Black towns, Black places where Blacks could live and prosper, free from whites. And one of those places, as some may know, was places like the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And for those who do not know the story of Black Wall Street, you had Blacks that worked for decades, for generations, to build a city that has, hundreds of businesses, restaurants, theaters, airports, airplanes, movie theaters, churches, recreation centers, schools, post office, all this stuff, a self-contained Black city. And in 12 hours, white folks burnt it to the ground and proceeded in white mobs to kill more than 3,000 Black people, men, Black men, Black women, and including some Black children. And they were dumped into mass graves. And Blacks have been trying to get reparations for Tulsa, Oklahoma since that time. That was 1921. So you can see how dishonorable the city councils, the state legislatures, and the federal Congress has been, in that they would not even grant reparations to something as horrific as places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida, different places. So we're going to show you a little bit of how city councils and how white legislators controlled black businesses and kept and keep black businesses from competing with whites. You got a lot of black people that feel that, well, I got, just as much opportunity or equal opportunity with whites because of the civil rights fight. And we have to constantly let them know that civil rights fight or not, you are and forever will be dominated by whites until you separate yourself. That's the way you were before the initial era of slave trade. But we're going to talk about 1806. Now, in 1806, you have the turn of the 18th century, the turn of the 1800s, and you have British white folks, parents and grandparents that have taken over the northern parts of the newly formed United States, or newly forming United States. They're planning and putting together all of this in preparation for creating the new form of British government over in what is now considered to be America. And then, of course, you have the rebellious British American children in the South that are trying to stop them. And you got whites that are trying to distinguish themselves in the North from what they consider to be their barbaric offsprings in the South. So the problem with that is that each of them are making black codes, slave laws, slave codes, Negro codes, and Jim Crow laws in order to control black people and the black population. The North trying to control indentured servants and free slaves as they're coming into northern cities. And, of course, Southern white folks trying to control and physically keep. We have a thing where it is saying that, and yeah, the switchboard is just going crazy, but we're going to keep it on rolling. But we got Southern whites that were trying to keep physical control over the Negroes and prevent Negroes from fleeing to the North or going toward freedom, or even more so going over to the French and the British that were in the northern states, as well as the French in Canada. And so you had this huge battle going on here. But in the process of this battle, knowing that Congress is leaning toward and debating toward whether or not to free the Negroes in the South, Southern cities and Southern states started creating a multitude of laws and ordinances and whatnot, trying to prevent it. And so we're going to talk about 1806. And 1806, it shall not be lawful for any Negro, slave, or other person of color to have the command or to act as a patron of any boat carrying goods, wares, or merchandise, or produce from either of said cities, Savannah or Augusta, to the other. All right. So now we're going to talk about Savannah and Augusta a lot today. And the situation with Savannah and Augusta is that those were the two before the Civil War where Atlanta was, the landscape changed. and the capital became the most important part. But Savannah and Augusta, Savannah being the major port for ships that were bringing slaves, illegal and otherwise, into the state of Georgia, and Augusta being the major auction place for the trading of those slaves by whites, illegal and otherwise. And so Savannah and Augusta created a lot of Negro slave codes and Jim Crow codes, black codes for Georgia. And they created them for the cities of Savannah and Augusta, and they also kind of led the way for other cities in the state of Georgia to make the same, to follow suit and create the same laws and codes. So that was 1806, and basically they're saying that no Negro can have any kind of, he can't be a captain or anything on a ship coming into Savannah, and he cannot be anyone of any position dealing with anyone in Savannah or in the city of Augusta. Okay. Now, 1807, a year later, because, you know, they keep every year, they're trying to create more stuff to stop blacks from competing. It's particularly black males from competing with white males, as black males are becoming free Negroes and getting, trying to break into freedom, trying to buy their freedom, trying to, get to the north and whatnot. Citizens of Savannah, Augusta, heretofore and do now experience great injury and inconvenience from the number of free Negroes, mulattoes, and mestizos of vicious and loose habit, who have settled and daily settling therein, who may then or at any time thereafter reside within the corporate limits of the cities of Savannah and Augusta. Any person who hires or lets any house or tenement to any free Negroes, mulattoes, or mestizos within the limits of said city without permission from the city council thereof shall be subject to the same penalties as if such house or tenement had been let or hired to a slave. Now, what are white folks trying to say here? What they're saying is they don't want the Negroes to have any place to live. They don't want them to have any place to work. They don't want them to have anything to do except sell themselves back into slavery or hang around too long and be caught and put back into slavery. So for my young people, I get questions a lot about the terms. You're going to hear the terms a lot. So, of course, you know, Negroes are those black folks of African descent that were imported, that were brought to this northern continent. When they talk about mulattoes, that is a black person that has is made up of Negro or African or blood and white British European blood. And then when they talk about mestizos, those are the original black Indians of this land, the original black natives of this land that is mixed with Spaniard blood. Remember, Spaniards, Spain actually was hitting the original black natives of the southern portions of the continent and raping black women and creating offspring for the purpose of enslaving. So you have many of the original black natives of this land were decimated in populations in the southern portions by Spaniards, while the British were, the children of Britain, were hitting the eastern parts of the continent, and the French, of course, were hitting the continent from two separate sides, which was the northern part of the continent and the southern part of the continent, trying to control the entire population of original black natives before the other two sides got a chance to do so. So you'll hear the term Negro, mulatto, and mestizos. And then 1818, all and every person of color, Indians in amity with the state, or regular articled seamen or apprentices arriving in any ship or vessel accepted. Now, when they talk about, when white folks in their laws talk about Indians that are in amity with the state, and when they talk about Indians accepted, these laws are against Negroes, against mulattoes, against mestizos, but Indians accepted. What's going on there is that during the initial fight for the continent, you had the original black natives were killing white folks. White folks were trying to conquer and take over their territories and villages and lands, and there were fierce battles ensuing. And you have a situation where whites were able to, they didn't have to take blacks, the original blacks of Europa, of the land, the kingdoms of Europa, from Europe, because whites were able to withstand that climate. They didn't have to, the Portuguese, which is what Asians are, the Portuguese did not have to take blacks, the original Asiatic blacks, from the Asiatic lands, because the Portuguese were able to, the white Portuguese were able to withstand that Asian land. So all the continents, including Australia, all those, the whites were able to withstand the climate. The reason that blacks and that Africans had to be taken from the African continent is because whites were unable to withstand the climate of the African continent. And so they had to move the population of black slaves. Unlike the other continents, they had to move the slaves to a area, to a continent that was more where whites could actually survive the climate. And so that was the reason. Otherwise, whites would have taken over the entire African continent as well. It just was not able to be done because they couldn't survive the heat. And so now you have the northern continent, and whites came in on the northern part of the continent because that was the most conducive to the climate that they were able to deal with. And they kind of worked their way south by the seasons. They tried to move in the cooler seasons so that they would be able to survive. But now, at about 1700 or so, after fierce battles, you had whites that, had heard rumors about all this. They would run out of Rome and whatnot, and they had heard about different resources and whatnot in Western territories. So there was this push by whites to start moving westward. Well, this meant that they were about to have more battles with the original black natives in their native territories. And so as these battles were ensuing, of course, whites trying to move in cooler seasons were where they would have somewhat of an advantage. They were at a disadvantage because the original black natives were able to fight in all 4 seasons because that's what they were used to. And so the battles that ensued, the original black natives were able to cause severe losses when in the white militias and white armies and white mobs that were trying to take over original black native land and territory. So in some of these battles, whites had sustained such loss that they actually decided to create these treaties with the original black natives. And it basically says that, we're just passing through. We don't mean no harm. We won't mess with you. Don't mess with us. And we agree that we won't bother your people, all this good stuff. We won't bother your land. And so, of course, whites were lying. They were not telling the truth. But unfortunately, many black native tribes fell for these treaties, fell for these agreements. And whites just came back later on and broke the treaties. But now you had this move westward, and you had whites that were, trying to break some of the treaties, and of course it ensued more battles. But then here comes the forming of this so-called respectable and civilized uniting of the states and the Confederate States. And so now you have whites that are trying to figure out, well, what about all these treaties? We want to expand and make the whole continent. At that time, they were trying to make the whole continent the United States. And so they were coming up with all of these different schemes and plans about how to trick the Indians, the original black natives, out of the remaining territories that had not been conquered. And so one of the suggestions that came up, one of the schemes that they came up with in the North, and a lot of people think that this scheme was hatched in the South, but it was actually a scheme hatched by the good white folks that black folks believed in the North. And this scheme was called the Dawes Roll. Now, during the slave trade, the Spanish slave trade, the French slave trade, the British slave trade of this continent, you had a lot of Spaniards that had offspring that were of lighter color than the original black natives of the land. You also had, during the battles and fighting, you had a bunch of whites who decided to paint themselves as the go-between or liaison between the original black natives that were fiercely fighting whites and the whites that were trying to move westward. And so these whites would infiltrate the original black native tribes and would try to befriend and make it seem like they were there to help and whatnot. And a lot of tribes fell for it. But one of the things that would occur is that they started mating. These whites would mate after periods of years, would mate with some of the native women and would be, trying to create Native American and white offspring. So from 1750 to 1799, you got all these white folks in these different municipalities and whatnot, trying to figure out what to do about all these treaties because, they are supposed to honor the treaties, but of course there was nothing honorable about the white folks. They were trying to figure out a way to get out of them. And so they came up, they got a hold of this suggestion for the Dawes Roll. And at the same time, you had them in anticipation of the battle and debates that were going on about the freeing of Negro slaves in the South, in the Confederate States, in order to bring them, force them into the states, into the Union. What to do with all these Negroes that may one day, if Congress decides, be free Negroes. And so the scheme that was developed was the Dawes Roll and the Freedmen Bureau's list. And so the Dawes Roll was basically a list of supposed native indigenous people. And so what whites did in order to achieve this tricking of the original black natives was that every person that looked supposedly native or Indian were placed on the Dawes Roll, and every person that looked African or black were placed on this freedmen's list. And the treaties, of course, covered these so-called Indians, which now no longer consisted of the original black natives. Now this Indian list was made up of all of these so-called white, mulatto, and red colored descendants of the intermingling between the original black natives and white folks or Spaniards, or in order to get the red color, you would have to take a person that was already mixed and then mix them with a Spaniard, and you would get that reddish colored skin. You would get that flushed blood-colored skin. And, of course, most of the people were actually the mulatto whites, which had a few or limited Negro features, but you saw them as white. Whenever you saw them, they were seen as white. And then you had mulatto blacks, which, of course, were considered slaves or freedmen, and they, of course, had all of the features of the Negro, except that they had a lighter colored skin than the original natives of Africa and natives of this northern continent. And so you have as we do the classes for His Name is My Name Too, reparations initiative, you're going to hear a lot about the different tricks that were done in order to switch some things around. You'll hear how blacks were tricked at every turn. But anyway, so now you hopefully, because of this particular lesson, understand why the images that you see of so-called Indians look more white than what we know to be the original black natives of this land. And remember, Christopher Columbus thought that he was in India because how dark the people was when he got here. So we know that the people that were here, that the white pilgrims and white British slaughtered and fought with, were not of a light skin color, were not of a white color, were not of a yellow color. They were of a dark pigment, as dark as any African country or island country. So we do know that part, even though whites try to gloss over that particular point when they're talking about the history of America. Okay, so you'll see that when whites are talking about those Indians that are have relationships with or treaties with the United States or with the newly formed United States or newly forming United States, they're talking about those Dawes Roll type Indians, the descendants of the mixtures between the original black natives and whites or Spanish or French. Okay? So now, in 1818, this is still whites are debating in the North and the South about the potential coming of the freeing of Negro people. And so they're making all of these laws to try and stop it and control it. So who shall after the first Monday in May next be found within the limits of this state, whose names shall not be enrolled in the book of registry described in the preceding section, or have been enrolled, who shall have been refused certificates in the manner therein prescribed, and who shall be working at large, enjoying the profits of his or her own labor, and not in the employment of a master or owner. Now, this is white folks creating a law for this, okay? So if y'all didn't get that, they said anybody who's in the state, any Negro, mulatto, or mestizo, any Negro, free person of color in this, and when they talk about free persons of color, they're not talking about Asians like black folks have been duped into believing. They're not talking about Spaniards, Hispanics, white Hispanics that blacks see now in Mexico. They are talking about black folks, light-skinned black folks, brown-skinned black folks, and dark-skinned black folks. Okay, and so to say, any one of these black folks whose name shall not be enrolled in the book of registry described in the preceding section, or having been enrolled, who shall have been refused certificates, white folks have to give you a certificate in order to work in any other counties, in the manner therein prescribed, and who shall be working at large, enjoying the profits of his or her labor, and not in the employment of a master or owner, or of some hired person by and in virtue of an actual and bona fide contract with the master or owner of such person of color, securing to such master or owner the profits arising, meaning black folks couldn't make any of the money. And the only way they can do it is if they have a contract that gives the money to their white master or owner from the labor of such persons of color shall be deemed, held, and taken to be slaves. Now, these are free black folks. They don't either bought their freedom or won their freedom, whatever the situation. But a law was created by whites in Georgia that said, I don't care. It said, if you are working as a Negro in any of the cities or counties in Georgia, and you're found to be working and you're not working for a master or owner and giving, with them receiving the money and you being a poor black or broke person, if you're found with money, if you're found profiting in any way off of your labor, your own labor, you will be deemed, held, and taken to be a slave. Okay? I told y'all this, his name is my name too. Situation is causing a little problems for people. So if you have a black family business, you done got yourself free, you done built up a business, and here comes this white Congress that says, I don't care, you free Negro. If I find you and you're making money in your business, and that business is not, you're not owned by some white person, and they getting the profits for that business, for your labor, you will be taken back into slavery. Your business will be illegally seized and sold to a white person, and you will be, once again, a slave. So, these are the laws that white folks got together and created in order to prevent black businesses, in order to prevent black persons from competing with white persons in business. And so you have a lot of these. This is from the Black Codes in Georgia. And you can go online and put in Black Codes in Georgia. It will take you to where you can purchase the book. And we'll go through some more of the different Black Codes in Georgia over the next series. But so you understand that this was not just something that was going on in the South. And a lot of black folks try to believe now that this stuff was just going on in the South. But we know this not to be true, because the laws and ordinances that I'm telling you are laws that whites created, and they're part of the laws of the different states. And each state, as I said, have black codes, Negro codes, slave codes, and Jim Crow laws. Okay? So to help you understand, this is 1849 I'm going to tell you about. And if you figure white folks are in heated debate in the different state legislatures in the newly forming United States legislature, and they're battling about how to bring this all together, the forming of it, the solidifying of the United States power, and the states trying to enforce their sovereignty and whatnot, so that they don't have to give up slavery. And so here we have 1849, which, you got a couple of decades, a decade and a half before the so-called emancipation. And this is an act to alter and amend an act to incorporate the Southern Mutual Insurance Company. I want y'all to remember that name. So I'm going to be telling you some things about the Southern Mutual Insurance Company when it comes to finding your family members and information I'm going to be telling you about companies that that we know profited off of the slave trade and participated in the slave trade. But said corporation may insure for any term not exceeding 10 years the lives of slaves against death, such damage, loss, or death not resulting from the carelessness, negligence, or design of the party insured, and to any amount not exceeding 3/4 of the value of the property insured. Now, what is the property insured? And that would be your relatives. That would be your Negro family members. And they were insured for an amount not exceeding 3/4 of the value of that family member of that black person. You'll find that the codes are going to be something that a lot of people are going to be shocked about because they just don't do the correct research in order to find out. And for those of you Negro folks saying, well, the North was different, you know, I got to take you to the Chronicle, the Black Chronicle, and I told you can get the Chronicle for $20 at the Wilson Group, or you can go to our website and order it, or you can get the Black Code by going online. It is $19.99 for Black Code. But this here is Cincinnati out her black population. August 23rd, 1831. Now remember, white folks in the North and white folks in the South are battling about the whether or not to free these Negroes in the South, to make the South conform and come into union with the other states. But whites in the North do not want a bunch of free Negroes running around. They want Negroes as a mentally controlled indentured servants. And so you got Negroes hearing about the imminent coming of the freeing of the slaves, and Negroes are thinking that what's coming is the freeing of all slaves. They didn't know that whites were planning only on the freeing of Confederate slaves. So Negroes hearing this news are getting a little boisterous and planning for their new lives as free and completely free Negroes. And so August 23rd, 1831, of all the prejudices, assaults, and confining laws directed at free blacks in the northern states, none have been more vicious than those in Cincinnati, Ohio. Recent events there have prompted half the black population to move to Upper Canada. Now you wonder, how did so many black folks become citizens or move into southern Canada? You got all kinds of, if you live in any of the northern states, you know that there are a lot of black folks in the southern part near the border of the United States and Canada. There are a lot of black towns and black people in those towns in Canada. And you wonder, well, how did so many black folks get to Canada? Why did so many slaves, if the North was so free, why did blacks keep on running and run all the way to try and get to Canada? Well, this is one of those articles from back in the day. It's from September 1st, 1831. And it is letting you know what happened on August 23rd, 1831. We're doing an article on a bunch of blacks having to move from the States and move to Canada. Now, this is different from what when I hear black folks talking about the situation in Arizona, and oh my gosh, and we need to do something to help the white Hispanics in Arizona because they're having to move from the state and whatnot. Remember, these white Hispanics that we're talking about in today's situation are, one, I have a huge problem with black folks comparing them to slaves because the three things that are involved here that nullify that particular notion. One, the Hispanics come here voluntarily. The white Hispanics are not brought here on ships or chains or whatever. They come here voluntarily. Even the ones that get into a truck and are, in the back of some smuggler's truck, they voluntarily get into that truck and decide to go over to start a new life in the United States and leave Mexico. Two, they get paid. They may not get paid a lot, but that is because just like anyone else who is not legally a citizen, they have to take whatever pay they can get. But please believe that once they become citizens, or once they are, for the ones that are have their children here or are born here, they make they expect the same pay as everybody else. They make the same thing, and and sometimes more than Negro people. And of course, because they hire their own, they're able to keep that money in their community and also send that money back to Mexico to make life better for their people in Mexico. And of course, three, the ones that are here have the backing and support of the Mexican government. They have, you've seen the Mexican president say, come to their defense, and they're able to, just like any other white person, any other white group, they have done extreme damage to black neighborhoods, to black populations, and to black people. So when you talk about the situation in 1831 with Cincinnati, what you have is black folks that were brought here by force and in chains and held in captivity for centuries, for decades, for generations, for years. And now, having finally earned or made their way to some resemblance of freedom, whites got together and said, I don't care about you being free. You can't be free here. And so just with the passing or the hitting of a gavel, it suddenly, these black people and these black folks had to leave in order to not be placed back into slavery. And so they ended up having to move to Canada. But, of course, we're going to go through the Black Chronicles as well and just kind of correct some of the misguided notions that blacks have about some of the things that have occurred and are occurring in this land when it comes to some of the dishonorable acts that have been perpetrated. But anyway, as far as the black family businesses, if you know for a fact that you believe or have rumors in the family about your great-grandfather or your great-great-grandfather having owned a business or a farm or whatever, and that business or farm or whatever it is was taken or stolen or he was tricked out of it. Your grandmother had a business, was tricked out of her business or whatever. While you're doing your paternal lineage chart or your maternal lineage chart, you need to make notations of those businesses, those family businesses that you feel were taken, or those family lands or whatever, because you will be able to track by the names, the last names of your family members as to whether or not they at any point actually owned land. And then we're going to show you about the black business reparations that as a part of this initiative, because you have so much atrocities that had occurred, especially during the so-called Reconstructive era, where I told you a white Congress decided, okay, well, for all of the years and years and years and decades and generations of abuse and enslavement, we figured that the compensation for that to make us look civilized would be to give each of the Negroes selected on the Freedmen Bureau list 40 acres and a mule to plow the land. But remember, a lot of blacks think that that was the law. That was merely a suggestion that compensation would be the fair compensation for the Negroes for all of this enslavement. And it was fiercely debated by whites in the South and the North, and never did come to fruition because it could not pass any white legislative situation. So, as far as the businesses goes for today, you want to make sure that if you had a family business in any of the cities or counties or towns today that over the past 20 years, 40 years, whatever, that have been decimated or taken or sold or stolen by rezoning or whatever situation that white city councils and white corporations using black city councils to steal that property and steal those businesses and shut those businesses down, that you make a notation on your charts about those businesses so that those that information can be researched and that can be added to your reparations situation for your family. So hopefully we've given you a little bit of information about how black family names can help you find businesses, black family businesses that were targeted and destroyed and stolen by whites, and so you can get that reparations part inserted into your charts. Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk about that wonderful piece of black community, entertainers reparations. You have a lot of entertainers that have tried to put out good stuff, that have tried to put out positive things, that have tried to build positive images in black family names. You got a lot of entertainers that have tried to keep their black families together, and they too have had their businesses, their companies, their whatnot stolen and forced out and whatnot. So we're going to talk about black entertainers tomorrow, and we hope that you can join us for that and any black entertainers that want to get some information. We hope you'll join us as well. And if you want to support the initiative, you know you can go to our website, BAC Berry. If you want to read the poems for yourself, you can go to DYC TV. And until we're able to get with you tomorrow and wrap up the part 8 of the series. Then we want to say to you, as always, all power to the people.